My name is Taylor, and today we are making a beginner-friendly EDC pouch. This is a simple project. You don't need much sewing experience or special equipment, and we will go through the process together step by step to make this pouch. I have a free pattern for this project on my website, taylortaylor.com. You can find the link below. It has a full set of instructions and diagrams to go along with this video, and I highly encourage you to download that and refer to it as we sew this pouch together. It's not required. The pattern is really just a regular sheet of printer paper, either 8.5 by 11 or A4 size, but the download will be helpful to refer to as you sew, and it's free. Once you learn how to make simple pouches like this, you can move on to more complicated designs and bigger projects like tote bags, slings, backpacks, even clothing. This is the third video I'm doing in a series of videos for beginner bag making. If you've never sewn anything before and you don't know basic sewing terms like right and wrong sides of fabric or how to start and stop a stitch line, I have two videos that you might want to check out first. Part one is about getting started making your own gear. We talk about fabric, zippers, thread, webbing, and how to cut and mark fabric. Part two is about basic machine setup and sewing your first seams. Both of these videos will help here if you have absolutely no idea where to start, and both videos are linked to below. Each project and video will build on ideas and concepts learned in previous videos and help you develop sewing skills to start a new hobby or maybe even your own bag business. So let's get going. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is gather our supplies and tools. At a minimum, you will need a pair of scissors or a rotary cutter, some pins or clips, a ruler, a marking tool. I like to use chalk, a zipper at least 9 inches long. Longer is fine. You can use a pre-made zipper like this one that has stops built in, or zipper that's sold by the foot or yard like this. It needs to be a nylon coil zipper. Metal teeth zipper will not work because we're sewing the zipper right into the seams, which is a pretty common bag making technique. And the nylon coil zipper it's made to be sewn into seams. So I'm using a number 5 YKK, and that just means that the zipper teeth are 5 millimeters across. An optional feature, about 6 inches of grosgrain ribbon or seam tape to use as zipper tabs, and then another 11 inches or so of paracord to use as a zipper pull tab that gets attached to the zipper pull at the end of the project. You could use webbing instead of grosgrain ribbon for the zipper pull tabs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'll be using grosgrain because it's thinner and it's the easiest and most practical option for a first project. 2 layers of webbing over a zipper can get a little bit thick to sew through, and paracord used for zipper pulls is also an option, but it requires a lot of tiny stitches in the seam to get a good hold. I want an optional lighter to melt the ends of our zipper tape, paracord, and grosgrain ribbon later on. You will also need your fabric, and I'll talk about what fabric I'm using in just a bit. And then you will need the pattern or a regular 8.5 by 11 or A4 size sheet of paper. This is the pattern that you can download free from my website, and it's linked to below. And as you can see, it has full written out instructions and diagrams to follow along step by step. Lastly, you need your sewing machine threaded and ready to go. If you don't know how to do that, I would encourage you to check out your machine's manual or even YouTube videos specifically for your machine. Most manuals will walk you through this step by step, where to put the thread and how to thread your machine. Every machine is different, and you'll want to know how to do this for your specific machine, which is probably different than mine. I cover machine setup basics in part 2 of my sewing basics video linked below in the description. Needles for this project, I would recommend a size 14 to 18 universal needle, depending on how heavy your fabric is. And I'm just using regular all-purpose polyester thread. You don't need a bonded nylon thread or anything that heavy duty for a pouch like this. You can use any fabric for this EDC pouch, except really stretchy stuff like knit jersey or stretchy spandex. Outdoor technical fabrics like these woven nylons are great. This is a 500D Cordura. This one is 1000D Cordura. I've made these out of X-Pack, You can use denim, heavy twill, or even a lightweight quilting fabric if you put an interfacing on it. As far as fabric goes, I'm using this laminated pack fabric called EcoPack. It's made by a company called Challenge Sailcloth, and it's made from recycled materials and waterproof. And I'll link to where you can find this below if you want to use it, along with the pattern, of course. The very first step is to cut out your fabric. So what I like to do, lay the pattern down, and then I like to use a rotary cutter on a cutting mat like this one. But if you're using scissors, that is perfectly fine. And if you're just starting out, you likely don't have one of these rotary cutters. If you're using scissors, what you would do, you could chalk the outline of the pattern on your fabric like this, remove the pattern, and then cut it out. Some people like to actually pin the paper pattern to their fabric and then cut it out like that. Either way is fine. Feel free to do what you're most comfortable with. But I'm going to go ahead and just use this rotary cutter to cut out my pattern. Now that we have our fabric cut out, some of us will need to finish the edges of our fabric before we start sewing. If you are using one of these synthetic fabrics like the woven nylons or the X-Pack that doesn't fray much, you might be able to skip this step and get away with not finishing the edges of these fabrics since they don't fray much. If you want more durability and longevity for your pouch, or if you're using a fabric that frays like a cotton twill, for example, you'll want to finish the edges of your fabric to prevent the fabric from fraying. If you happen to have a serger, you could overlock the edges of your fabric, but since this is a beginner project, I'm going to assume that most people are using a regular sewing machine. The easiest way to prevent your fabric from fraying is to sew a basic zigzag stitch all the way around the edges of your fabric. A zigzag stitch is a stitch most home sewing machines can do, and it's literally what it sounds like, a stitch that zigs back and forth as you sew. I cover how to do this more in depth in my Getting Started Part 2 video, so if you don't know how to do a zigzag stitch, I'd check out that video. It's timestamped, so you can go right to that section if you want to, but I will cover it here quickly too. So to do this zigzag stitch around the edges of our fabric, the first thing we want to do is set our sewing machine to do a basic zigzag stitch with a medium stitch length. So on my machine, I select different stitches, and there's an electronic, like a digital menu. Your machine, it might be a wheel or a dial on the top or side of your machine. But choose a zigzag stitch and go ahead and have a medium stitch length on that zigzag stitch. That's probably going to be like a 2.5 to 3 depending on your machine. Then what we want to do is we want to hand crank our machine a couple of times so that the needle is all the way over to the right. Since this is a zigzag stitch, the needle goes back and forth left to right. We want our needle all the way over to furthest to the right in its zigzag pattern. The idea here is that we are sort of wrapping or overlocking the edge of your fabric with the zigzag, so it prevents your fabric from fraying. I'm gonna go ahead and zigzag around my EcoPack, even though it doesn't fray very much, just to kind of show you how this works. It does start to get a little fuzzy around the edges after a while, so doing this will just prolong the life of the pouch. I'm gonna have my fabric gently pressed up against the needle. So as the needle comes down, the fabric is just gonna be just gently pressed up against it. Our threads are off to the side here. We're gonna lower the presser foot. We're gonna do a back tack right at the beginning like you do on every stitch that you start and stop, just to anchor those threads. All right, the needle on the right should just miss the fabric on the right side and sew into air. The left side of the needle is sinking into the fabric, and on the right side, as it zigs to the right, it's sewing into air, just missing the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to sew all the way around. We're going to stop at the corner, lift your presser foot, and rotate your fabric 90 degrees. When you stop at the corner, make sure you stop with the needle down before lifting the presser foot and rotating 90 degrees. It looks like this. When you get to the end, it's okay to hand crank a couple times just to make sure you're in the right spot. Okay, I may have overshot just a little bit, that's okay. There might be a little bit of an adjustment you need to do here in the corners. and we'll just continue on. Back tack at the end of your seam, our stitch line. Okay, this is what your fabric should look like if you've went ahead and done the zigzag stitch all the way around. Let's get our zipper ready before we do anything. Take note of which side you operate your zipper from. This will be important when we start sewing. Some nylon coil zippers will have the zipper teeth facing up when you open and close the zipper, and some nylon coil zipper will have zipper teeth facing down when you open and close the zipper. Okay, we're going to cut our zipper to 9 inches long. If you're using zipper like this that comes in a long roll, just go ahead and cut it to 9 inches, and that's what I've marked here. I've got my ruler out and I'm marking 9 inches from my zipper. And you can cut this with a pair of scissors. You can use the rotary cutter. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut right over mine with the rotary cutter, and you can just cut right through those teeth, no problem. If your zipper is made with stops already installed, we're gonna go ahead and cut those stops off, as long as you still have at least 9 inches to work with. So just go ahead and cut your zipper tape to 9 inches. And then if your zipper is like this one and it has a zipper pull already on it, you can go ahead and take that zipper pull off, and then you can separate the two halves of the zipper like this. So we should have, at this point, the zipper cut to 9 inches, and you've separated the halves of the zipper. All right, now the fun part begins, actually sewing your pouch. There are two sides to your fabric, the right side and the wrong side. The right side is just a sewing term for the side of the fabric that is meant to be on the outside of your finished pouch. And the wrong side is the back side of the fabric. Your zipper also has a right and wrong side. The right side of your zipper is the side from which you can open and close it, and the wrong side is the back side of the zipper. Unless you're using reverse coil zipper or a waterproof AquaGuard type zipper, the right side of your zipper will have the zipper teeth facing up. And often when we sew a seam, we're either going to be putting two right sides of fabric together, or the right side of fabric and the right side of the zipper together before we sew. This ensures that when we turn the finished pouch right side out, the right side is showing. So for me on this project, the right side of my fabric is this plain kind of medium gray, and the wrong side has these blue X's across the back. And so that should make it pretty easy for you to figure out what I'm doing here. So we're going to pin or clip each side of our zipper to each short side of our fabric, right sides together. So the right side of the fabric we want to be on the outside of our pouch when it's finished is facing up, and the back side of the zipper, or the wrong side of the zipper, is also going to be facing up towards us. The zipper is a little bit longer on each side, so just try to center that the best you can. And again, we have the right side of our finished pouch is facing up right now, and the back side of the zipper is facing up right now. And we've got that centered as best we can on each side. The reason the zipper is a little bit longer, sometimes as beginners, it's a little bit tough to get everything lined up. And I just want to make sure that we have enough zipper on each end in case it shifts a little bit as we sew. We're eventually going to cut that zipper off even with the sides. Okay, once you have each side of your zipper, right sides of zipper to the right side of your fabric, clipped or pinned in place, we are ready to start sewing. Next, if you used a zigzag stitch to finish the edges of your fabric, we need to switch our machine back to a regular straight stitch. So go ahead and do that now. From there, the next step, we need to put the zipper foot on our machines. So every machine should have a zipper foot. Mine looks like this. So what you want to do is unclip, or however you take off the presser feet on your machine, you want to go ahead and take off that regular presser foot, and then we want to install the zipper foot on our machines. This thing here is called the presser bar. It goes up and down as you sew. And on my zipper foot, you can install the zipper foot to the left or to the right on the presser bar. And I'm gonna install my zipper foot over to the right. I just lower the presser bar like this and the feet attach. Yours might be a little bit different. Go ahead and install your zipper foot now. And like I said, I'm installing mine to the right on my presser bar because our work is going to go over here to the left. The zipper foot just allows us to sew much closer to the zipper teeth. Once you have your zipper foot on your machine, you can go ahead and take your clip together fabric and zipper and place one side under the presser foot. We're going to be sewing this seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I would recommend sewing a few practice seams using a 1/4 inch seam allowance on some scrap fabric before sewing this seam, especially if you've never sewn anything before or it's been a while. As you sew, you want to look at the seam allowance guide on the bed of your machine, not the needle. In this case, we are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we want to sew from one end of the zipper to the other at a 1/4 inch. My machine doesn't actually have a 1/4 inch mark on the bed of the machine, and yours might not either. Often the 1/4 inch guide is the outside of your main presser foot, but in this case, since we're using the zipper foot, it might be a little bit different. So I'd recommend using a ruler to see where your needle drops down, and then find a mark on your machine somewhere to act as a guide for your 1/4 inch seam. Normally you wouldn't have to worry about this, but since we're using the zipper foot, it's a little bit different determining where your seam allowance is. So I know that on my machine, if I line up my fabric right here with the edge of this feed dog, that I know I can get a 1/4 inch seam with my zipper foot on. Yours might be different, but you can just put a ruler in here and you can basically measure from the edge of the fabric to where your needle comes down, and that will tell you where a 1/4 inch hits. And then, like I said, I have a little mark right here that I know if I line up the edge of my work, the zipper tape, and our fabric right there, I know that I get a 1/4 inch. So you'll want to measure that on your machine. Just make sure you have a nice 1/4 inch mark to work from. So here's what this seam looks like to sew. Have your machine set to a medium stitch length. On a lot of machines, that's 2.5, which means your stitches are 2.5 millimeters in length. We want to back tack at the beginning and the end of each seam. And if you don't know how to do that, check out my machine basics setup video. This basically anchors our thread in place at the beginning and end of each stitch line. As you sew and come up on one of your pins or your clips, just move it out of the way. Don't worry about sewing into the areas on the ends here where the zipper is overhanging the fabric. And remember to look at your seam allowance guide on the bed of your machine and not look at the needle. You can take your time here. Make sure you keep both the zipper and the edge of your fabric lined up together. We want to make sure that we back tack again at the end. Just a few stitches forwards and backwards. Locks our stitch in place. I'm going to go ahead and do this on both sides. At this point, your pouch should look like this. Both sides of the zipper should be sewn to each short side of your fabric. And all we want to do at this point is we want to take and press that zipper seam to the back. So if you're looking at the right side of the fabric, you want to go ahead and just flip this to the back side and kind of finger press that zipper seam as flat as possible. And you want to do that on both sides. It might not stay completely in place, but we're just going to push this to the back side and do your best to kind of finger press that seam flat and to the back side. Now we want to top stitch this zipper seam. The top stitch is stitching that will be seen on the outside of whatever you're sewing. It can be functional, it can be decorative, or both. In this case, it's a little bit of both. The top stitching helps the zipper seam lay flat, it adds an extra layer of stitching to reinforce the zipper, and it prevents the zipper seam from catching on objects as you take them in and out of your pouch. It also looks nice on the outside. we're going to be sewing this top stitching from the right side of the fabric, and you can sew anywhere from about 1/16 of an inch from the zipper seam all the way to 1/4 of an inch away, depending on the look you want and how wide your zipper tape underneath is. If you do end up going wider on your top stitch, just make sure that you're actually sewing through the zipper tape on the back side of the fabric. We want to catch this zipper tape in our top stitch. At this point, since we were just sewing with our zipper foot, we want to make sure we take that zipper foot off and go ahead and put your regular kind of general purpose presser foot back on the machine. Again, mine just kind of pop on and off like this. Yours might be a little bit different. And make sure your thread is off to the side. Okay, here's what this top stitching looks like on my pouch. So I'm gonna put your work right under the presser foot like so. And a lot of times with top stitching, it's nice to increase your stitch length just a little bit. You could go up to a 3 or maybe a 3.5. It's not necessary, but top stitching will often have a little bit longer stitch and a little bit heavier weight thread. I'm just gonna continue using our regular weight thread here, the all-purpose stuff that we started with. So I like to sew pretty close to the zipper seam. On my machine, I have this mark right here, and it will be helpful to use a mark on your presser foot for this. This little red mark, I'm gonna line up this original zipper seam with this red mark as my work goes through, and that will ensure that I get a nice straight line of top stitching all the way down. Your top stitch mark will be somewhere different depending on how wide you're sewing your top stitching. But to get a consistent straight top stitch, you want to have something to line up your fabric with as you sew so that you're not staring at the needle. And to be honest, smooth, nice looking top stitching can take a little bit of practice, but you'll get the hang of it quickly and it really makes your finished projects look professional. So I'm going to go ahead and sew here. You want to make sure that the seam allowance on the back side is laying flat and that it's tucked this way towards the center of your fabric. So make sure that seam allowance isn't like curved out like this. So we want a nice flat seam here, and we're gonna start and stop our top stitching like we do all of our seams, the few stitches forwards and backwards to anchor that thread. And as I sew here, again, we're just making sure that this seam is lined up with whatever top stitching mark that you're using so that you get really straight stitches all the way down. That looks really nice. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side exactly the same. Okay, here's what your project should look like at this point. Here's the top stitching, and then on the back side, you should see 2 lines of stitching like this, the original seam, and then the back side of our top stitching. So you can see how that top stitching really makes that zipper seam lay flat. Okay, I decided last minute to add a little hook and loop field to this pouch to give me the option to add a patch later. If you make a few of these pouches, it might be nice to have a way to label them with different patches, or just have a patch on your pouch for fun. So I like this one that says cats and caffeine. So here's what I did. I cut a 1 3/4 inch square of the loop side of hook and loop or Velcro and placed it in the lower right corner of my pouch. If you're going to do this, you need to decide now where your zipper is going to sit, because we have to sew this down before we sew up these side seams. So my zipper is going to sit about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch from the top of the pouch. And you can see I've clipped the sides together here to kind of place that. We can get an idea of where this needs to go. So I've clipped this together so we can kind of place the zipper where it needs to go. And yours might be in a different place. This is totally arbitrary and up to you. You can lower your zipper further down. You could push it up a little bit further to the top, but mine's gonna sit here with about 3/4 of an inch of fabric at the top of my pouch. And you can just kind of pin and clip yours in place until you find a spot where you like it. Since I've got about this much exposed on the top, I think I'm gonna keep that same distance here on the bottom. So I've chalked a line that's about 5/8, 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of the pouch here. And then on the right side, keep in mind that there's a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on this side. So on this side, if I want to make this roughly 3/4 of an inch over, I would need to make this mark an inch over to accommodate for this 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's roughly where I want to have my loop placed. And I like to chalk these lines right on the fabric and then place my loop down on the right side of our fabric. And we're gonna sew this loop down basically the exact same way we did our top stitching. We're gonna sew as close to the edge of the loop as we can. About 1/8 of an inch is acceptable here. And I'm gonna go ahead and swap my thread to black to just make this match. And I'll meet you at the sewing machine. Okay, so we've got our loop placed on the right side of our fabric here, and I'm going to sew right on the edge, basically like we were just top stitching. That's essentially what we're doing here. We're top stitching this down. Make sure you back tack the beginning and end. Stop with the needle down, lift up our presser foot, then we rotate our fabric 90 degrees to sew the next side. All right. Once the top stitching is done and the optional loop field is sewn, we want to bring the two sides of our zipper together and install the zipper pull. So we want to decide now which way the pouch is going to open, from the left to the right or the right to the left. It's really up to you and it makes no difference. The ends of the zipper tape need to be inserted into your zipper pull, and you want to put them into the wide side of your zipper pull to get it started. This can be a little bit tricky, it can be a little bit frustrating, but just give it a few tries. Sometimes it's helpful to lay the pouch flat like this and try to feed the ends on. Sometimes it's helpful to lift it up and start it that way. Do what works for you, but keep in mind here that the ends of our zipper tape might be uneven. And what we really want to do is make sure when we get our zipper pull on that the sides of our pouch are aligned. If you get your zipper pull on and it's skewed like this, then you're going to have a twisted pouch. And when we finish our pouch, it's going to be twisted. So as you put your zipper pull on, try to make sure that the side edges of your pouch are lined up as that zipper pull goes on, so that you don't have like a weird twist or a skewed pouch. So I'm gonna go ahead and try and put this zipper pull on now. It can be a little bit tricky, like I said, and you might have to try a few different times, a few different ways to make it work. There we go. So once you get it started, it goes right on. Okay, at this point, once your zipper is installed on your pouch, we want to go ahead and turn the whole piece so that the wrong side is facing out. So go ahead and do that now. Make sure that your zipper pull does not come off as you're doing this. Okay, once your pouch is turned inside out, we want to go ahead and position our zipper either 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the top here. It's totally up to you, and it's totally your personal preference where you want the zipper to sit. Mine is still at the roughly 5/8, 3/4 of an inch that I chose earlier. And keep in mind, if you sewed the optional loop patch down here on your pouch, then you want to make sure that you keep this distance the same as we chose before. So this will be the final position of your zipper on your pouch. If you're using the optional grosgrain seam tape for zipper pull tabs, these are the little tabs for holding onto when you're zipping and unzipping your pouch. We want to go ahead and cut 2 pieces of that grosgrain now. So I've got a 6-inch piece here. I've marked the middle. at 3 inches. And really what you need are 2 3-inch pieces of grosgrain ribbon seam tape. You can use regular heavy webbing here. If you have webbing, a lot of pouches do use webbing for a zipper pull tab like this, but 2 layers of webbing plus your fabric can add up to be a really thick area to sew, especially when it's placed over a zipper. So depending on your machine and experience level, that's a pretty difficult thing to sew through at times, which is why I'm using this thinner grosgrain ribbon seam tape for my zipper pull. So we want to make a loop with the grosgrain by folding it in half, and we're going to place each end of the grosgrain tape in between the layers of fabric with the loops facing inwards towards each other. So at the grosgrain ribbon, it looks like this, folding it in half. We're going to do this on each side, and what we're going to do on the inside of our pouch here, you can go ahead and zip up your zipper most of the way, and this grosgrain is going to the loop side like this. It's going to be facing inwards. It's going to be between the layers of fabric underneath your zipper tape. So it basically goes in there just like that. And I'll just put a clip on this one to hold it temporarily, and we do the other side. So I'm going to repeat that exact same thing. Got the loop of grosgrain ribbon and loop it together like this. You can take your loop and it's positioned underneath the zipper. You can see that, I hope. The loop side is facing inside like this towards the center of the pouch, and it's going to be centered underneath that zipper in between the layers of fabric. And you want the edges of your grosgrain ribbon to be aligned with the edges of your fabric, not necessarily the zipper tape. So you want to do all of that on each side, and we're going to clip this in place. Okay, this is what your pouch should look like before we sew up these side seams. You should have your zipper placed at the top here. You should have your grosgrain ribbon or your webbing if you're using it. It should be folded in a loop, and the loops should be facing inwards, centered underneath this zipper tape. From here, we're going to sew up these side seams. From here, we're going to sew each open side of the pouch using 1/4 inch seam allowance. It's perfectly acceptable, depending on how heavy your zipper is, to gently hand crank your machine over the zipper teeth when you get to that point. I do this all the time when making bags. It prevents your machine from binding and possibly breaking a needle if those zipper teeth shift your needle as you go over the zipper. So we want to back tack at each end of our seam. And as before, go ahead and just remove your pin or your clip as you get to each one, and just be conscious that you have that seam tape underneath your zipper, so you don't want that to shift. Remove this clip. As we get a little bit closer, I'm an advocate of hand cranking, just to be safe over the zipper teeth. As soon as you're over them, then go ahead and just keep sewing regularly. Then we want to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go back over and sew the ends of the zipper grosgrain area once more for reinforcement. Always back tacking on each end of your seam for reinforcement. And you know, if this was a backpack or a tote bag or something, I'd probably recommend sewing this entire seam again. It's such a short seam, I might just kind of go ahead and do that. But really right now what we're trying to do, we're basically just sewing over the same stitch line we just did. But I like to add a second layer of stitches over the ends of the zipper just to hold that in place, give it some reinforcement. It's going to be a heavy use area as you open and close that zipper a lot. And really it just needs to be over the zipper tape, but this is such a short seam, I'm gonna go ahead and just do a second layer of stitching all the way down. Probably overkill on a pouch like this, but that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. And we can clip all of our threads. We're almost done. Okay, so the next step after we've sewn our side seams is to go ahead and trim off any excess zipper or seam tape, grosgrain ribbon that we have hanging over the edge. So you can just use a pair of scissors or a rotary cutter and just trim that right off on each side, flush with the edge of your fabric. If your zipper tape is made with a synthetic material, and it likely is if it's a nylon zipper tooth, use a lighter to lightly melt each end of your zipper tape and each end of the grosgrain ribbon to prevent fraying. So really all you have to do, if you've got a lighter, be careful here, fire is dangerous and all that, but just lightly singe the ends like this, and that should be about all that it takes to make sure that that stuff doesn't fray in the future. Sometimes you might need to open this up a little bit just to make sure that that grosgrain actually got a little bit of flame. Just be careful not to light your fabric or yourself on fire. Okay, now we want to make sure that your zipper is opened all the way up, and we're going to turn the pouch right side out. There's a little trick here for each corner if you want to try and get really crisp, sharp corners. If you take and fold your seam allowance over like this, when you turn the pouch right side out, you want to hold on to that folded over seam allowance. And essentially what you're doing is that seam allowance is folded over like this, and you want to take, and when you turn your pouch inside out, you want to try and hold that seam allowance so that it stays in place as the pouch flips. And that will sometimes help you get a cleaner corner. So you can try and do that in each of these corners. These corners are looking pretty good, but what I've found that works really nicely sometimes is flat side of a flathead screwdriver, and just kind of gently slide the corner into position. You don't really want to poke. You can end up with misshapen corners. And if you're not careful, or if your object is too sharp, you can actually poke through your side seam or your corner. You don't want to do that. Just be gentle here. If it's not super sharp, that's okay. But those are looking pretty good. All right, that is looking pretty good. We are almost finished. Okay, so the very last step here is, if you're using the optional paracord as a zipper pull, go ahead and loop that through your zipper pull now. So I like to loop it through the bottom hole of my zipper pull, also through the top like this. Then, so once you've got it through both the bottom and the top, then go ahead and just tie a double knot. You can do this a different way if you're using a heavier gauge zipper, but on this number 5 zipper pull, this is about the best way you can do it. So this paracord is intentionally a little bit long. That's so that we have enough to grab onto as we tie our knot. I like to make sure the knot kind of down close to the top of the zipper pull. Adds a little color to our pouch, and it makes holding onto that zipper pull a little bit easier. It also kind of takes some of the noise out of the jingly jangly part of that zipper pull. So once your knot is in place, I'm going to cut these off at about 1/2 inch, about right there. Trim off the tails, and then this stuff frays really quick. really easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and melt the ends of this paracord as well. Again, be super careful, don't burn yourself, don't burn your new pouch. All right, so pouch, and you know, if you got a fun little patch to put on here, that would be fun as well. I love cats, I love coffee, and there you go. All right, done. Congratulations on finishing your first pouch. You should be really proud of your finished project. If I was helpful to you, please consider liking this video, and if you want to learn more about bag making, please subscribe to my channel. This is the first project in a series I'm doing on bag making, starting with this simple pouch and moving on to more complex pouches and bags. I'm working on an advanced beginner pouch and hope to release that soon, so stay tuned for that. Reach out in the comments below or at taylortaylor.com. I'm also on Instagram at taylortaylor. Thanks for watching.